It is ambitious and it is a challenge to the rest of the world. Today, the European Union laid out plans to cut greenhouse gas emissions 55% by the end of the decade. It calls for phasing out the sale of petrol and diesel cars by the year 2035. And it also calls for a carbon tax that both the U.S. and China oppose. Critics say the plan places too much of a burden on consumers, especially in poor European countries. Environmental activists say the plan doesn't go far enough.
The moon landing in 1969, a historic day, and an event that Europe's leaders have compared to another historic challenge, the fight against climate change.
We do not have all the answers yet. Today is the start of a journey. But this is Europe's man on the moon moment.
The EU aims to make Europe the first climate-neutral continent by 2050. That means no more carbon should be emitted into the atmosphere than what's absorbed, for example, by forests. As a first step on this journey, EU leaders have pledged to cut emissions by 55% by 2030. But critics say these cuts are nowhere near enough to meet the goals of the 2015 Paris Agreement. Others fear less wealthy EU countries and many of its poorer citizens won't be able to afford the measures. The EU, though, has promised to help lower-income households and fight climate change by introducing a package of new laws.
All right, we want to cross over now to Tim Gore in Stockholm, Sweden. He is the head of the Low Carbon and Circular Economy Program at the Institute for European Environmental Policy. That's a sustainability think tank that's based in Brussels. It's good to have you on the show, Tim. I mean, this is an ambitious plan that Europe is presenting to itself and the world. Is it what is needed to meet the promises and the pledges of the Paris Climate Agreement?
Well, thanks for having me. The first thing to say is that, of course, we need always more action. But this is the EU not only putting on the table a new strengthened climate reduction target by 2030, 55% reductions below 1990 levels, but critically also setting out a comprehensive plan to actually achieve it. So that's a world first. And what this package is really built on is the polluter pays principle. It's going to extend carbon pricing to around 2/3 of emissions in the EU. Now, that's a good thing as long as we make sure that the revenues it generates, and it's going to generate about 100 billion euros per year by the end of the decade, as long as we spend those revenues well, we can both cut the emissions and reduce inequalities in Europe at the same time.
Yeah, you say making the polluter pay. I know a lot of people watching will wonder, does that mean making the consumer pay more as well?
Well, ultimately it will, because in the end, if you ask business to change what they're doing, to take account of the carbon emissions that they're producing, what they tend to do is pass that on to consumers. So it doesn't matter in the end whether you try and regulate or whether you set a carbon price. Consumers will have to pay. Now, the advantage of doing this with a carbon price is that you will generate substantial revenues in the process. So the really critical question is how you then use those revenues to make sure that the poorer citizens are not bearing the burden. So I think it's important that the Commission today has set out some initial plans for a climate social fund that's going to generate billions and direct those towards some of the poorest households across the EU to help them with the transition. This is all about, embedding fairness at the heart of the proposals. I think what we've had today is a start, and now we need to build on that.
And Tim, I've got about 30 seconds. Let me just ask you, there are 27 members of the European Union. Will these measures have to be watered down before we finally get an approval by everyone?
Well, inevitably, nobody gets everything that they want. There's also the European Parliament to take into account. They'll have views on everything as well. I think the key here is it's a package deal. So you're going to have horse trading, but as long as politicians can sell this to their publics to show that actually this is going to be good for their health, it's going to be good for jobs, and it's going to make sure that we have a safer climate, both for our current generations and for future generations. Okay. If they can do that, I think that the package will get through.
Tim Gore with the Institute for European Environmental Policy. Tim, we appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Thank you.
Thanks.